Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And as we call the meeting to order, the Public Works Committee meeting for July 24th, 2023. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Our first agenda item is disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? Seeing none, we can move to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder to move the agenda? We got Member Murphy and seconded by Councillor Kristanji. Resolved that the July 24th, 2023 Public Works Committee agenda be approved. All in favor? It's carried. Next, we have receipt of previous minutes. Can we get a mover and a seconder to receive the previous minutes? Councillor Kristanji, Councillor Howe. Resolved that the Public Works Committee minutes of June 26, 2023 be received.
That was supposed to be July 26th. That was in.
Oh, no, this is receiving the previous minutes. That's fine. June 26, 2023 be received. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we have no delegations. We have consent report, though, and if people have questions on that report, we can ask to have the report lifted and ask those specific questions. So if people do want to have a discussion on the report or have any questions related to the report, we just need a mover and a seconder to do that. So was there anybody that had questions or about the report? Otherwise, can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the Public Works Mid-Year Department Update Report? Member Rady?
Can we lift that just to have a discussion around, there's a lot of stuff coming due in the fall. That concerns me. I'd like a chance.
Do you want to use your microphone just so?
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. We have a lot of items coming. I read the report. It was very helpful, but we have a lot of stuff coming due in the fall. So I'm worried, frankly, about I see things saying dependent on workload.
So
Can we discuss that?
Do you want to move it?
Yes.
And then we'll need a seconder. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Howe? So moved by Member Rady, seconded by Councillor Howe. All in favor of lifting that item? Thank you. That's carried.
Oh, sorry. So you don't have to, that's not a, can I say?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Through you, Chair. So for lifting a consent item for discussion, there's no motion that needs to be passed for that. Yeah, so that was just the motion to receive. What we do is we just note it in the minutes. So as of right now, the actual motion to receive is still up for vote. But yeah, just to clarify.
Apologies, because we've done it differently in the past at council, where it was a consent had to be lifted first, so we don't need to lift it? Okay. Okay, so questions? Member Rady, you had questions about it?
So again, thank you for this report. I looked through the budget documents, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I looked through the budget documents last year and I saw there was a pile of work ahead of you guys in 23. And so this is kind of the mid-year measurement point against the budget and the planned work. We have a lot of consultants, which is great, but somebody needs to manage consultants, right? We can't just let them do what they want. We need to give them guidance. Are we using the same consultants? So when I see the transportation master plan and I see the parking study and I see the downtown reimagine, they're all using transportation consultants. Are they the same company or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So anytime we hire a consultant, providing it's over a certain threshold value, we have to put it out for public tender or a request for proposal. In this case, sometimes there's duplication in terms of we're getting the same consultant, and sometimes, we're getting different consultants. So the three that you mentioned were which ones again?
Transportation Master Plan, the parking study for downtown core and Grimsby on the Lake. And then the last one was the downtown reimagined traffic study. So all three of them reference transportation consultants. And I just know they can be tough to imagine. They have to be managed.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So there's currently the downtown reimagined, and the other one that you mentioned are separate consultants. The third one was the transportation master plan, and that hasn't gone out for proposals yet. So they are different consultants.
If I could ask one more, one near and dear to my heart, the CMMS system. Is that project, it says phase 1 implementation's in progress. So it looks like all the design work and the procurement work is done. And so now transportation has been identified as the group to start in the fall of 2023. So are you comfortable that you're staffed for that and schedule? Are we on schedule for that, et cetera? Because this is going to be a real good thing for the town or a real black eye for us, right? I think we all know that.
It's going to be a good thing. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, it's going to be a good thing. Actually, Thomas is here too, and he's been, the focus has kind of been on the transportation team right now in terms of the operation side of things. So they were the guinea pigs, for lack of a better word, to kick this off. We chose to do the transportation division as our first division because we felt it might be the most challenging. Currently using a lot of paperwork, and we're transferring to a digital system for work order management. So we're currently on schedule. We've been meeting on, I would say, more than a weekly basis, so maybe a couple times a week with the consultant, developer, software provider, if you want to call it. Really good consultant so far. I think we're feeling very comfortable that we're going to meet our timelines on time.
My last question is, with that system, does that include the self-service portal, or is that separate from the transportation implementation?
That will include the portal, but it may be limited to transportation-related inquiries right now. As we phase into the other parts of the organization, those will be rolled out as we move forward. So the intent is in future years, starting next year, the other divisions will be implemented, and that portal will be scaled out to include those other divisions as well.
Thank you, Member Rady. Councillor Howe?
Through you, Chair. Page 8, cast iron replacement, it refers to area 5 and 7. What are those two areas? I don't think I've ever actually seen a map that refers to the areas or a breakdown like that.
Too quick on the button. So I think you're referring to the wastewater I&I reduction study. So area 5 and 7 are basically the Old North Ward, as we call it, Whitaker area, Old Orchard, that area. Essentially high infiltration value, so a lot of water getting into, stormwater getting into the sanitary sewers, and that's the area that we're dealing with. Yep.
Any further questions? Okay, I just wanted to say, you were on a pretty tight timeline, and I wanted to say thank you, because this is a great place for anybody, whether it's the public or, I would say put this up on the website under the Public Works Department, because updating this going forward, I know that it was, like I said when we asked for it in the first place, putting it together was a task, but hopefully updating it won't be. So this is a great way for people to answer their own questions and seek some of the information they're looking for. What you see is how many balls you guys have up in the air at the same time, and how many things that you're able to juggle, which is very impressive. And but thanks for the report. And the only recommendation I have is that we put it someplace that is not in an agenda that is easy for people to find, because navigating through an agenda and through the calendar system to find that information is somewhat quite difficult for people, sometimes quite difficult for people. So if we can, on the Public Works page, put that up there in PDF form or on a spreadsheet, I think that would be very helpful for people. Member Spink?
Yeah, just one other suggestion, if you're going to do regular updates, if you could just highlight what changes or what gets added each time, and then we'll know, what we need to focus our attention on and what is added to the list. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duvoli?
I think as we find our way through the roles and responsibilities of standing committees, we may finally sort out this question, but this is my question. This is a really great comprehensive list, and it's good to know where the projects are at. Explain to me how you monitor the budget, the actual expenditures, and then that will lead to question 2, which is how you share that with us so that we also have an idea where we are in terms of the dollars spent.
Mr. Warman, do you want to answer?
Sorry, my button is delayed. I hit it too quick and it flashes at me too quick. Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of monitoring budget, we have frontline technologists that are responsible for essentially managing the projects. We have oversight in terms of supervisors and managers who are reviewing purchase orders, payment certificates, and invoices on a regular basis. Keeping on top of understanding where our budget's at and making sure that we're not overspending, or where we run into issues, obviously bringing it to the attention of our finance department and if needed, coming to council, depending on our procurement rules. In terms of we do probably a question more for finance, but we do the Q2 or Q3 variance reporting. So variance reporting at the end of each, through 2 or 3 quarters through the year, which is a more high-level review of all of our expenditures, where we're at with both capital and operating expenditures, and we review those and forecast them to where we think we're going to be at the end of the year to identify if any surpluses or deficits, and we do that through our financial team in participation with the various departments.
And so that is good. And I think if my vision were to come true, we would do all of this on a quarterly basis, and each of these quarterly reports would then come to the particular committee that has oversight of that function. And so we do struggle, and I think and that's why I say we're struggling to figure out who does what in terms of the committees. Is the review of things like this also part of the finance function? Is it part of the Public Works Committee function, and so on? But I would really encourage us, I guess, that besides reports like this, that we would also get financial reports that would show us that this is where the project is. This is the giant budget for it. This is, it says we've completed phase 1. This is the actual, and so on, right? So that we would know that the dollars, of course, are mirroring, is that a word? But to know where we're at, right? And I'm not so sure exactly how this is going to take place, but I would just like to encourage our senior Public Works team to have some discussions with finance and ask for you to come back with some sort of methodology of reporting back to the committee on a regular basis that way.
Just for clarification, though, the budgeting occurs, the tender goes out if it's something that's tendered. If it doesn't fall within the threshold of the budget, then you have to come back to council or to finance to ask for additional funds. But it has to fall within it can't go outside of that. So I don't want to, while I understand your concern about money, it's pretty tight as far as from a spending perspective, what can and can't happen in the department, because they're not allowed to spend. What's the threshold, Brandon? Is it $50,000? What, $5,000? I can't remember. There's a specific number. If it's more than a certain amount, it has to come back for budgetary reasons. So once we approve a budget, we approve the project, asking for reports on how the money is being spent, that kind of happens the next year's budget, because you'd get an indication of, and not everything falls within the January to December timeline that we want from a budgetary perspective either. So there's a lot of overlap and but anyway, Brandon, if you want to just quickly touch on how that budgeting occurs, I don't know if you can or not.
Sure, I can try. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to pull up our procurement bylaw, but I don't know if I had it. I don't know if I have it right at my fingertips, but budget is approved by council. That establishes obviously the number that we're supposed to be working within. When we go to procurement of, you got it there? Perfect. Can you hold that open? When we go to, this is technology. When we go to procurement and award, before we award, we need to make sure that award of whatever that service, product, or whatever is, it complies or is within our budget. Any changes outside of that budget, more than $100,000 and more than $100,000 has to come back to council. So that's on the procurement side if there is an agreement registered. So if we entered into an agreement with someone to provide a service and that service, the cost went out of whack and we had to authorize additional works under that procurement, if it's over 100,000, we'd have to go to council. Anytime that we're out of budget, so for whatever reason, we have to come back to council in terms of to bring it to your attention and request additional funds or determine a strategy on dealing with it. So I hope I answered that. I wish my finance counterparts were here to provide a better answer, but I tried my best.
No, and I think, so just to clarify, the budget gets set and staff follows through on that budget. We don't want to constantly be, micromanaging. I don't even know if that's the right word, but once we've set the budget and you're following the process, then any report should be the completion of that project. Because we don't spend money periodically in a project. We pay for the project, right? It's not like, unless it's a massive project, we're not paying, like a water main, it's telling us that we've paid for 3/4 of that project so far, and we're going to pay for the additional quarter. I don't know how valuable that is, but if it's over budget, obviously. And on the positive side, we've also had times where we were able to expand projects because it came in under budget. Now, that hasn't happened recently, but I'm hoping that that'll happen in the future where, for example, with water main replacement, there were years where we budgeted for, 1.2 kilometers of water main replacement, but when we got the tender back, we were able to do 1.4 kilometers, 1.5 kilometers. So I'd love to see a future where that is the reality, and even those would come back because it has to be approved either way for that kind of expansion. But anytime large amounts of money are being spent, it's going to come through this committee and it's going to come through council. But constant reporting, I don't know the value of that, but if you think that has value, Councillor Nevoli, I respect that. I'm just trying to understand what our goal is for asking for that, because we've already spent the money from a budget perspective. So I'll let you speak.
I think what happens is that the budgets are done on quite a global basis. So there could be, within our capital budget, water main replacements, and it's X dollars, but within that could be 10 smaller projects, right? And those are things you know, where it builds up to those numbers, but they're not things that we can tell. So when we look at this report and it says we have this project going on and this going on, it's well, in fact, it's impossible to relate that to the budget. So we have a written report with progress details, but we don't have any financial numbers that are part of it, right? So we're missing that piece. It's like, I don't know, Bell saying, we're putting in fiber optic and it's $5 billion to do this, but really it consists of Lincoln, Grimsby, West Lincoln, and so on. And so, when people say, how are you doing on the project? And you say, oh, we're doing great. But, it could be that one piece of the project is not doing well, another project is doing extremely well and is coming under, and so on. And so I'm just thinking that while you're updating this all the time, you could include something like that, perhaps just to expand upon it a bit more.
To answer your question, though, a lot of those details are in the budget. We just didn't, because we didn't have this committee prior to this year, we never had a chance to look at those kinds of details, but I can tell you, having been a member of this committee in the past, and probably what will be coming forward this year again, is we'll see the entirety of the Public Works budget. We will have specific breakdowns, because all those little details are in there, whether it's, these are the specific roads that are being done, this is the cost, all of those things are in that Public Works budget. The specifics are in there. It's just we haven't really had a chance to have an exposition of those details because we didn't get into the nitty-gritty this year with budget. I think that that's something that we will see in the future as we go through the committee system. Mr. Wortman, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I think I'd just offer that my understanding how we do it currently is variance reports come from finance, and they go to the finance committee or council, who then review those reports, and included in those reports are the details of where the projects are at. I understand those variance reports, I believe they're working on Q2 now, so I'm not sure when that's coming to committee and council, but I know that I did my part. So that part's done and it's off to finance. So, but I completely understand, I think, where you're coming from. I know in the past, our procurement was different in terms of anytime we awarded a contract, we would come directly to Public Works Committee to award that contract. Now what we're doing is we're working within that procurement guidelines to say, as long as you're within budget and it follows these rules, you did it this way, then we're good. And then an update report would come as part of I don't know if it's the variance reporting or if there's a specific report that talks specifically to our procurement. It may be the latter, but I can certainly look into that and provide additional guidance.
Yeah, Councillor DeVoley, please.
And perhaps that is the name of the report. Thank you. That helps a lot, that variance report. And if it's done on a global basis for the entire town, and that's going to go to finance, that's great. I love that process. But I'm thinking that Public Works should know about its component part of it. So perhaps when that whole report comes together, if at least the Public Works component of that report could come to the Public Works Committee, that would be really useful information, I think, without having to go over and beyond and create new reports.
I'm certainly something I can take away with the team, and we can discuss whether, that's a possibility. Again, we don't want to duplicate work, but if it's a matter of transparency and providing information to the committee that's already being communicated to another committee or council, then, we can certainly look into that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I'm going to go through this again because we didn't need to lift it. So resolve that report DPW 2318, Public Works Department update, mid-year 2023, dated July 24th, 2023, be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. We have DPW 2319, Town of Grimsby 40 kilometer per hour pilot program. So we just need a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor, please. Member Rady. Counselor DeVoli. Okay, so the resolution is resolved that report sorry.
Yeah, you don't have to read it just yet.
Sorry. Is there anybody from Public Works who'd like to start us off? Mr. Wortman?
So yeah, I'm actually going to defer to Michael, helped author this report, so I asked him to just do a quick overview, and both of us are here to answer questions.
Mr. Palumbo?
Thank you, Chair, through you. So this report is coming in response to previous council motion regarding requests to conduct a 40-kilometer-per-hour pilot program. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look through the report, but basically this report provided some background information regarding these types of programs that are currently being used, what that program would entail in terms of staff resources and how it could be rolled out. And we also looked at some of the pros and cons in terms of doing a program such as this. Through that, we wanted to emphasize that in order for the town to engage in a program like this, we want to make sure that we're seeking a solution for a specific problem, and that a 40-kilometer program would actually solve that problem. So, for example, if it is if we're looking for traffic calming and we want to reduce speeds on a specific road, will a program like this and just implementing a 40K speed zone achieve that? After going through this this review, initially, this is kind of the most information we could give at this time, as it was kind of a quick turnaround. So there are still some outstanding questions and concerns that staff have, mostly with regards of how we would approach something of this scale and the financial impact that it would have. So that's why our recommendation would be to allow staff to complete our transportation master plan, which we do have upcoming this year. Through that process, we'd be looking at different programs such as a 40-kilometer-an-hour speed reduction for residential roads and other types of traffic calming measures. So with that, though, I'll open it for any questions that anyone has.
Okay, Member Smink, I saw your hands first.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I wanted to compliment the staff on this report, and also on their considered recommendation. I think it's very important to look at the possibility of changing speed limits or even a pilot in the basis of all the possible tools of traffic calming, if the goal is to reduce average or 85th percentile or even sort of high variance in speeds on any particular roadway. I would ask the staff if, when this is being looked at, if they could look at the completed pilots that have taken place in Ontario. A quick search that I made, Stratford, Halton Hills, there was a larger study done in Nova Scotia. Many of these places, the average speed was brought down by 1.5 kilometer per hour. And if we're looking at what can be effective, I think it's important to look at all of the possible tools, what the cost of them are, and what the potential impact will be. So I think looking at it more comprehensively, even if our neighbors to the east are jumping on it, I think it's important that we don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars putting up signs that may not have an effect if we can't look at it as a whole. So I would be supportive of the recommendation.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor Howell, and then Member Rady.
Through you, Chair. Again, I guess this is in general. It becomes basically a political decision. I mean, we kind of take the science and have to put it off to the side, and then it becomes a political decision as to what the average individual perceives to see, there on the street, and that's wherein most of it lays. If we had a magic wand and we could get all the enforcement that, we could use so that, speed limits are policed, and it's dealt with. But what's the chances of that? Without enforcement, we've got to take shots at it. And I would really, and I know what you're saying, remember when you look at the numbers, it's not much. But is that based on 50? Because, most people will tell you, well, 50 means 60, right? Well, 40, does that mean 50? So does it bring it down? Yeah, it's still over the speed limit if you start, when you look at the numbers and you got the wires on the ground. But that's the unfortunate thing is that, the perception, I think, more than anything. And it's a very personal thing. People see somebody go zipping past and they got the kids out there playing, and it's a very personal thing. So, thank you.
Mr. Wortman?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak to, I know we've provided in the actual report some speed values that we've monitoring. I think Michael explained in the report that, the various types of monitoring that we do to get a sense for the speeds that we're seeing on the roads. In the table that we're provided in the chart gives you a sense for what kind of speeds we're seeing on the roads that would be potential candidates for these 40K programs. And we're seeing average speeds in the neighborhood of 32 and 41. 85th percentile speeds are below 50 kilometers per hour. So this is posted speed limit 50, and 85% are traveling 50 kilometers or lower. So we would look at that as, our roads in those areas are operating safely. And we're actually quite surprised to see that, we do receive a lot of complaints about speeding, and we want to validate those complaints, but what we're seeing through the data is the speeds are within the speed limit, based on the measurements we're seeing.
Member Rady and then Councillor DeVoli.
Sure. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. You stole it right out of my mouth when I read this and said that, the higher number of complaints on average are these 12 streets. Then I look at the 12 streets and you're hitting 85 percentile. I think you're wise to put this and incorporate it into your master plan and take a little bit of time. I think Councillor Howe's right as well in that, here's real data that says, I know you're angry because somebody just sped past here, but it isn't normal. What you're seeing is an exception to the rule. People seem to be abiding to lower than the speed limit for the most part, really. So let's take our time and do this one right. I think you got a lot on your plate already this year. And we need to focus on getting some of these bigger projects done while we do this study. And it doesn't sound like everybody else is rushing to do this, right, in other municipalities either. So I think everybody's taking a stand back. And I also noticed in your report, Michael, you made comments about things like stop signs aren't necessarily going to help us with traffic calming, right? All of our traffic calming is up now, right? I see Lake Street's there. I was up on Ridge the other day. Ridge is there. I see a difference in people driving on Lake because I'm down at that neck of the woods, and I see it because they're in my rearview mirror and I can see the color of their eyes, right? So they're not getting the message yet, but people are starting to get the message. I'm not going to say where the police are hanging out on Lake. I know where they are, but they're there. And I've seen Niagara Regional Police on Lake a number of times over the last 2 weeks. So I think it's part of its education, part of it's what are these things in the middle of the road? Why are they there? People are asking questions. Let's go away and do this one right. It's going to be a political hot potato. I think Councillor Howe is correct. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Wortman wanted to respond, and then I've got Councillor DeVoli, and then I'll go to Councillor Cristangi.
Thanks. I just wanted to add, through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add that the Transportation Master Plan is a huge initiative for us. We haven't done one since the 90s. It's basically a strategic document which is going to set the policies for our traffic safety going forward. There's going to be a huge public consultation component where the public will have an opportunity to provide input into the things that they would like to see. 40K program would be one of those, or speed reduction programs would be one of those initiatives we'd be looked at. And we'd certainly benchmark that against what other municipalities are doing, what are the successes of those programs, is this a valid tool for us to use as part of our toolbox. Just to say too, that this will allow council to provide their strategic direction in setting the policies for how we move forward. So it's an opportunity for both the public and council to provide input and in that other direction. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Councillor Davoli?
I will say that I really, really like seeing reports with the data as you provided. And so I'll relate it to my own life. I'm in the car with a family member. We're going down the street in my subdivision, and I feel like so you could probably guess who, he is going a bit too fast. And then I glance over and I look at the speedometer, and he's well within the speed limit. And so, ever since this notice of motion came out, I find I'm paying more attention to all the cars in my subdivisions and how fast they're going and so on. And quite honestly, my eyes, and I can't tell by looking at them how fast they are really going, right? There's a certain feel when I'm standing on the side of the road or on my front lawn or even in the passenger seat, but you really don't know until someone is actually measuring it or you see the speedometer. So this data is really, really important so that we don't make decisions based upon gut feel or things like that, but we do it based upon actual data. I do agree that sometimes our perception is that it's worse than it perhaps it really is. And of course, we're always concerned about those one-off items where someone gets hurt or is injured or even worse, right? So my next question then is, someone made reference to the NRP and they're out there and so on. Do we have any data from them, though, as to how many speeding tickets they are actually issuing in our community, and can they sort that by street as well so that we could add that to the amount of information that we have and call it extra independent third-party evidence of what is going on in addition to, our monitoring of this?
Mr. Wortman?
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr. Chair. So I can say that we work closely with the police department, Niagara Regional Police Services. Communication goes both ways. What we've been finding is with our technology, we're now able to monitor speeds and identify trends and then essentially flag that for the police to say, hey, we have speeding on, I'm not going to use a road, Smith Street. I don't think we have a Smith Street in Guernsey. There's speeding on this street at this time. Can you please provide enforcement? It allows them to be more efficient. That what has happened in the past is they get a lot of complaints on one certain road. They go out there. They're not seeing any speeding. They're not issuing tickets. Therefore, it's not productive use of the time. So we're trying to identify trends to make them more efficient in their time. Is, hey, we're seeing an influx at this time of day. Can you please put this attention to that? In terms of the actual number of tickets being written, I'm sure we can gather that information. I believe they might have shared it at the last council meeting or when the NRP came, but maybe it wasn't basic tickets. So anyways, certainly something that we can look into.
It wasn't specific to location, but they did, I think they did share it, but not, I think Councillor Davoli is asking for more specific information because, that way we know that enforcement's being undertaken. Now, they might, I don't know how much detail they want to give us, but I agree with you that is important information. Councillor Korstanji?
Thank you, through Chair. This is a tough one because I can really see both sides. Even though we're not seeing, the data isn't showing that the majority of residents are speeding, residents still feel unsafe in their neighborhoods, and I think that's the problem, whether they're feeling that 50 and below is unsafe. And a lot of these streets don't have sidewalks, have cars parked along. So I can see if you have your kids or you're walking along that street and a car comes flying by, even if it's 45, it's going to be too fast for that area and that short street. A lot of these streets aren't very long, so to hit those speeds at such a short distance is a high acceleration, I think. Especially if we're talking about like Elizabeth Street and some of the others. Now, I do like the idea of having all the data, having the plan finished to make a more educated decision on a multitude of different things. I'm just concerned of when that's going to happen. So do we have a time frame of when that plan would be sort of finished so that we could make a decision? Because I do like the idea of, I do like the recommendation, and I'm just concerned about the time frame of how long we have to wait to make our residents feel safe. I do want residents to have public input on the things that they would like to see and access to this data. But if it's going to be another year, or if it's going to be, I just don't feel like residents are going to feel like that's enough.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's fair to say we think that's important. We understand this is an important program. It's something that we've had trouble, honestly, getting off the ground because of our workload. We acknowledge that we would like to have this done sooner, but we're working towards getting that done. We understand that a lot of the motions that are coming forward are relating to traffic and speeding. A lot of the complaints that we receive are relating to traffic and speeding. So it is critical for us to get that initiated. I think it's fair to say we have a draft request for proposal prepared, and we're looking to get that out in the next few months. In terms of the process, it will be into next year in terms of the actual study being completed. But again, I think it's important for us to take a step back, ensure that we're doing this methodically, ensure that we're getting the public input, and we're not dealing with this on a piecemeal basis, but we're dealing with it as what is our program townwide, and how do we best implement, and how do we make residents feel more safe, or at least heard. One of the things I was going to say as well is the sidewalk side of things. So as part of this review, one thing we did want to look at is some form of screening tool to determine where our gaps in sidewalks exist and where does it make most sense to install sidewalks going forward. So can we increase the safety of the road, pedestrian safety primarily, by getting the pedestrians off the road onto sidewalks. So there'll be a component of that as part of the master plan as well.
Thank you. Well, I was gonna say, I'll let you speak, Mr. Palumbo, and then I'll go after you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to add on to that, just another kind of reason why it's really important that we are able to kind of work through this master plan process is that, like Councillor Costangi said, there are a multitude of areas that people have concerns about. So if we start looking at each individual area on their own and not taking into consideration what the effect could be, we could be opening ourselves up to more issues coming. Well, for example, if we were to reduce speed limits on majority of our roads right now and not have any policies or plans coming in behind, we don't really have anything that can help us when people still have concerns, even though after we've lowered the speed limit. So, for example, our traffic calming policy right now is calibrated for a 50-kilometer-an-hour road. If we were to go to 40 kilometers an hour road, is that policy still calibrated to handle complaints at 40K, or are we going to start seeing more roads that are going to be satisfying the warrant, even though we haven't adjusted the criteria to meet that? So as part of the transportation master plan process, we're going to be we can look at how all of these things fit together, and then ensure that when we have these concerns or we want to make improvements, we're doing so appropriately.
The last thing I wanted to say about it was the transportation master plan is exactly that. It's a plan. We don't want to be dealing with these things one thing at a time, and I think that moving forward, the plan is a very important process for the town, because it's not just going to deal with 40 kilometers per hour. It's going to deal with sidewalks. It's going to deal with active transportation. It's going to deal with, there's a variety of different things, and I think also it'll be an important educational opportunity as well, because I think that there are people that don't understand, including myself. You know, there are things that I have to look up, you know, like the use of 85th percentile, for example, and how that's a threshold that's used by traffic engineers to say, you know, this is the speed that the majority of the people in safe driving conditions feels like it's a safe speed to drive at. That's an important metric. That's an important thing that you deal with when you're talking about those things, but it's not something that we really spell out when we're talking about this to the public. So I think that public consultation, that public process will be as much for us to gather information from the public and from council as it will be to give information so people understand the reasoning behind decisions that are being made, and understanding, you know, why you don't want a stop sign, and what the restrictions are, and what, you know, the traffic manual, and all these little details that you take into consideration every day in the reports that you put forward, but people don't, unless they've specifically had an interaction with those things, necessarily understand or have any reason to have understood. You know, like it's never come forward. You said the last master plan was in the 90s. And I don't remember ever consulting or discussing it. So it might have been done in the 90s, respectfully, but I was, you know, like I'm an old man and I've been around for a while, and I don't remember us ever saying this decision is based on the master plan. Right? The way that we would look at an official plan, or, you know, some of the other stuff that we've talked about as far as resource management and all this stuff, the plan is in place for us to go back on. So getting this right and giving us the structure to go forward on, I think is an important part of so 3, 4, 10 years from now, you could say, the reason why we made this decision is based on the plan that we put in place in 2024. Right? So I think it's an important thing for us to do. It's going to be an important thing going forward for councils to look back on as a starting point for any decisions they make. So I hope we can get it moving quickly. Going back to timelines, I can't remember who it was. I think maybe Councilor Costangi again, in many of her brilliant comments, talked about timeline. I think the timeline is important. Getting it started is important. What we need to understand from a committee perspective and a council perspective is every time we move things to the front of the queue, so it's important to get ideas out there. So the 40-kilometer-an-hour investigating that is important. So we need to make that part of the master plan, definitely. But every time we put things, light a fire underneath all these burners, it takes away from that. So saying now that we're going to do a master plan and that's how we're going to move forward, now we're putting the responsibility on staff to actually get that master plan started and get it moving, so that way we can actually use that master plan as our reasoning behind our decision-making process. So that was a lot of words. I apologize, but the gist of it is, let's get it moving, and I love the idea, and I think it's going to be very important. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Member Smink?
I'm still on the idea of the timeline, and I want the whole committee to be prepared for what I think is likely to be a wait. And I know that there's political pressure on some members. I've never been involved in Transportation Master Plan, but I'm just kind of doing a little bit of the math, the RFP, the tendering, you're into September, October, it's a 6, 9, 12, I don't know, month period. It's going to be this time next year before we have a solution. So if this is what we're voting for, we're going to have to hold the line on this 40 until we have the whole thing together. I think it's worthwhile, but I don't want somebody to think, oh, we thought this was going to be done by November or something.
And to be clear, the resolution does say that. It says, you know, that it's going to be part of the Transportation Master Plan. So that's, if we pass this, that is what we are recommending as a committee. Council can make a different decision, of course, but that will be our recommendation if this is approved by the committee. Mr. Wortman, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add is, yes, there's going to be timing, and we want to make sure we're doing it right and spending the necessary time on it, but we're not absence tools now, right? We are doing a pilot study in terms of the in-road flexible bollards. We do have a stringent monitoring program. We have a traffic calming policy that we run it through. Michael receives lots of emails and phone calls that he runs through that meat grinder to determine if they're, what the response is, what the appropriate response is for those. So we're not absent of the tools. It's let's build on those tools. Let's make sure that we do it as part of a comprehensive overall plan.
Thank you. Councillor Cristangi?
Thank you, through Chair. I'm just curious, as if we're looking at probably at least another year, is there something we can do in the meantime to help the situation? I know we've got some things, and they work, and they're great. I'm just thinking these other streets that have nothing, these residents, I don't know that are going to be willing to wait another year. So are there things that we can put in place in some of the other streets to have in that meantime, basically?
Mr. Wortman?
I'm just going to say, I'd have to go back to the root of the problem, and are we dealing with a perception issue, or are we dealing with a data, sorry, and I'm not saying it right, an issue that has been determined through analysis of data. So I think that's where maybe the stumbling block is yes, we're hearing complaints, but when we analyze it, when we're looking at it through the various standards that are out there, the engineering practices and principles, we're not seeing a problem. So we are trying to be innovative in terms of the pilot program with the bollards is something that we haven't done before. We have the radar monitoring driver feedback boards that we can certainly put in these areas, and I'm pretty sure they've been in these areas that, again, they are basically just display the driver's speed as they're driving through there. We can put a negative message if you're driving too fast, or a good message if you're driving too slow. And we also have inconspicuous monitoring. That sounds kind of, anyways, it's basically devices that we can put on a pole that we can see what the true speeds are without the, what do you call it, alerting a driver to the presence of them. So some of the complaints we get is when you put the driver feedback signs up, people speed up because they're trying to see how fast they can go, kind of thing. So we're cognizant of that as well. So I hear you. We are doing our best to try to manage those concerns as they come in, and again, we're trying to think out of the box in terms of certain tools that we can use, but at the same time, I think that it is important that we make sure that we understand that this is a priority, and we'll carry it forward as soon as we can.
Just to be clear, though, the 12 sites that were chosen for this year's pilot were the ones that most represented the concerns and the data. They were prioritized based on the things that we're talking about. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes and no. So majority of the sites were selected, or the main reason that the sites were selected was because that they fit that criteria where we felt that we were going to be able to evaluate the effect the easiest. That being their longer stretches of straight road where speeding is more likely to occur, or higher levels of speed. However, we did include a number of sites where we either do have existing speeding concerns, or areas where we do get a lot of concerns that just happen to fit that criteria. So it's yes and no, but yeah.
And, going back to the previous discussion, safety is one of the major points of a master plan. So, and that's every kind of safety, pedestrian, bike, and auto safety. So the quicker we can get this done, and it depends on the scope that we want to put out there, but it could also look at things like, public transit in other municipalities has been one of the things, obviously the type of public transit like buses, things like that is not something that we're going to look at in Grimsby, but public transit is often one of the considerations because when you look at a master plan, one of the goals is to get drivers off the road. And, you know, in a larger municipality, you might consider things like public transit. But anyway, I'm looking forward to that coming forward, to us actually being able to evaluate and give input and for that educational opportunity. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, I have a report, resolved that report DPW 2319, Town of Grimsby 40 km/h pilot program dated July 24th, 2023 be received, and that council defer the decision on implementing the speed reduction pilot program until after it has been further evaluated as part of a transportation master plan. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Next, we have DPW 2320, Roberts Road Citizen Petition. We have a discussion report on the citizens petition. Can we get a mover and a seconder to get the item on the floor for discussion, please? Member Rady and Member Murphy. And is there anybody from Public Works that wants to start us off? Mr. Palumbo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So this report is in response to another council motion regarding a petition from some residents within the Roberts Road area, specifically inquiring about multiple traffic calming measures. The report, we wanted to outline the kind of the background conditions of the area, as well as some of the history that's gone on in terms of staff's involvement in this issue. This is something that we have been dealing with since 2018, and through that time we've completed multiple traffic calming reviews for the area. The three items that were requested through the petition were speed humps, a always stop be implemented at Evergreens and Roberts, as well as reduction in the speed limit to 40 kilometers an hour. After we reviewed all of the information, we put it through our traffic calming warrant again, looked at these requests in a little more detail and what kind of the pros and cons of them would be. We have come to staff have come to the conclusion that we're not supportive of these traffic calming measures, as the existing conditions don't warrant these types of measures to be implemented at this time. Having said that, though, there is opportunities in the area to have a further look at improvements in the future, and those are things that can come about through the Transportation Master Plan. For example, when we look at connectivity of our active transportation network, currently there's only one sidewalk along Roberts Road. Is there an opportunity for a second? That's something that we could look at. Their needs for pedestrian crossovers is it a candidate for further geometric improvements that could improve road safety in the area? We're not sure, but we would want to look at that in more detail through further study. But as for the requests that have been put through for the petition, they weren't found to be warranted and therefore not supportive.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Palumbo about that? Member Murphy?
Yeah, my concern, well, I've got just a concern more about how the report will be received on Roberts Road, because you have people who wrote the petition, and we've all read it, they took quite a great deal of care with it. They made 3 specific requests, and they're all turned down. Now, I've read the details here, and I think that's the correct decision. And so my only concern is, how are you going to get back to them, and what are you going to say? Because you've got people there. There is in the report that we received this evening some fairly pointed language, i.e. staff forcefully strongly opposes this particular measure, et cetera. That's okay on an in-house document, but this is for the public. And, I think there's just a couple of things that I would recommend is tone that down a little bit. If there is a report that goes to the people who wrote the original petition, and assure them, as you are doing, that there are measures ongoing, such as with your armadillo, which I found really fascinating in the report. And because, we're dealing with the human element here, and sometimes people will read something like that, and they see strongly opposed, et cetera, and all that does is raise a red flag. So, I'm just saying, be careful when you get back to them, and, let them down gently, as it were, because they got none of what they asked for. But I think your conclusions are correct, and I think that the signage and the traffic calming measures that you have over there are doing a fine job, as they are on Kerman Avenue. I'm surprised there have been no complaints about Kerman Avenue, because that's a little raceway as well. It's kind of a little brother to Roberts Road. But anyway, enough said.
Yeah, there are actually a lot more houses on Kerman than there are on Roberts as well. A lot more driveways that front onto the road.
Yeah.
Councillor Zvoli?
I realize, Mr. Palumbo, you said that, this example is well within the scopes and the reasonableness of the road safety rules. But when I look at that first report that we were just talking about and the data that was there, average speeds on that one little chart, and then the 85th percentile, and every single one in that 85th percentile column is a low of 42 and a high of 49. And yet when we come to this report on Roberts Road, the 85th percentile was like 59. So, and yet these are both 50-kilometer roads, right? So explain to me again sort of why Roberts Road would stand out, why its 85th percentile would be that much higher, and yet we still wouldn't be concerned about that. Because what that's really telling me is that, 85% of the traffic going down that road is exceeding the speed limit by 9 kilometers, which I realize is a really human thing to do. But 9 kilometers, whereas these other roads that were given in the example, and I realize many of them are in subdivisions and so on, but their 85th percentile kilometer is under 50 even, which is the speed limit, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, the 85th percentile doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the majority are doing 80 or doing 59. It means that 85% are doing a speed at or below 59. So when you have to also look at that in comparison to the average speed, because that helps to give a good understanding of where the majority tends to fall. So if the average in the 85th are fairly close, we know that there's a lot of higher travel speeds. If the average speed is fairly much lower than the 85th percentile, it means that the majority are traveling slower, and then as you get up in speed, that tends to become less and less frequent. So we've also included in there that there is the percentage of vehicles that are traveling above 15 kilometers an hour, and that is, I believe it was 0.5%. So typically when we look at traffic calming through our warrant process, we look 85th percentile and the percent of overspeeders. These are key criteria that have to be satisfied, and typically we'd be looking for numbers of, say, 5% for overspeeding vehicles, and the 59 would be in our current policy, 59 would be the threshold for one warrant. But we have there's 7 others that have to get satisfied as well. So when we're looking at it in a whole, the speed, the 85th percentile speed is one aspect, but there's also other things that we have to consider too. And then just to add on as to why, say, Roberts would be seeing speeds like this as compared to the other ones, the simple answer would be the geometry of the road. It's about a 500 meter section of road. It's fairly wide open. has a clear sight line from end to end, so, and there's also a slight incline as you're traveling northbound, or southbound. So it creates an area where you would expect to see speeds a little bit higher, as it would be easier. But having said that, the numbers that we're having right now are fairly good compared to what they could be on similar types of roads as this. So staff are fairly confident that the current conditions are acceptable.
Mr. Wortman?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add very quickly to, just add to Mike's point, is Roberts Road is what we consider a collector, a local collector. So it does receive a lot of volume of traffic traveling off of Olderton, off of Main, to Livingston, to the service road. So you are seeing a lot of, not local residents, but pass-through traffic as well. So that another reason why you're seeing higher speeds than you would in maybe a local neighborhood road.
Actually, Councillor Howe is next, but
Through you, Chair, and I'm sure Brandon or Mike, the numbers that we're looking at, the most recent number is 2021. We're now 2023, and have we got numbers that are reflective of even this year? I mean, we've been out there for 2 months or 3 months.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we, I think the information that we presented in the report is for the last 3 months. Is that correct? Okay. And then also we do have so there's 2 reports. One we did in 2021, sorry, which is referenced in the report as here's our previous report, previous decision, and then the current report looks at not only those results, but we also looked at data for the last 3 months to make sure, have things changed? Is it out of whack, or are things still essentially the same as the last time we looked at it? The other thing I would like to say is, again, we understand that Roberts Road is a hot spot for us. We have a dedicated monitoring device that's on one of our streetlights that basically monitors the traffic on a 24/7, 365 basis. So we have real-time and results that we can look at and go back to.
Councillor Gristangi.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you for the report, because I did learn a few things with the speed bumps and stuff like that, with the emergency services and stuff. And I think that puts it into perspective when, residents ask for speed bumps. We always look at it from one point of view. I have speed bumps in my survey, so, but there are other points of view. So it was interesting to read that about the emergency services. I think it would be good to let residents know on that street that there is analytical monitoring and stuff like that. They would probably feel good about that, the measures that are already taken. I'm happy with the fact that the traffic calming measures are there and they do work, as well as Kermit, because both those roads are super fast. I walk down Roberts quite a bit. Maybe perhaps one of the things we could look at is having the painted crosswalk at the intersection that's in the middle of Roberts. I don't think it's there. I could be wrong, just with the white lines. There are a lot of bus stops along Roberts, so there are a lot of kids along that road in the mornings. I think pedestrian visibility can help people sort of slow down as well too. As I think if the Roberts Road residents realize that it's being monitored, that things are being considered and stuff like that, that I think they will feel better than just saying no, no, no. Like we do have things in place.
Member Spink?
I think I might be going to say what staff's going to say. Understanding all of the concerns and then trying to address them, whether it's speeding, whether it's pedestrian safety, being able to focus in on that's important. Just the engineer in me kind of went, about the painted crosswalk. If you paint a crosswalk, you give the impression to them that they have the legal right-of-way on the road, and they don't. There are other means of having pedestrian crossovers, which the town hasn't implemented yet, but probably will be looked at in terms of transportation master plan, and needs to be considered specifically for that. It actually could cause a hazard as opposed to creating a safer environment.
Just to respond to that, not across Roberts Road, but across lengthwise the side street. So you won't be crossing across Roberts traffic.
see.
There's a little side street there, and then somebody who walks it, it's a rolling stop.
Right.
So although Roberts Road, people driving down it, it is going to be in your vision, but it does make it a little bit safer, and then, oh, this is a pedestrian area, because, yeah, so it wouldn't, I understand what you're saying, absolutely, and I wouldn't put that in the middle of the road, but it really just goes alongside, but they're at that intersection where they want that stop, yeah, so it would give, for the pedestrians on the sidewalk, it would give them safer, and then it would cause cars to stop. But the cars flying down, see it out of the corner, it's just more pedestrian visibility.
Yeah, Mr. Wortman?
Yeah, so through you very quickly, I think certainly something we can look at. I know we have implemented similar, what do you call it? The flexible signage on Olive and the North Service Road, basically that says, please stop for pedestrians. So it's another way of reinforcing that stop sign at Evergreen. The drivers are supposed to stop at the line before they cross over the line. So again, it just reinforces the safety factor of stop at the line, don't creep through the pedestrian crossing. Something certainly we can look at.
And I agree with you, Councilor Christian, because I walk down there all the time with my dog, and there's a fear sometimes of the people, and it's not Roberts Road, it's the people going onto Roberts Road from those side roads that are not necessarily coming to a stop, or, even as a driver, sometimes I think that person's coming really quick. Are they going to come to a stop there at that stop sign? Because they come around the bend instead of stopping at the line. So, yeah, I think if there are improvements we can make to the lining of the road and things like that, that remind people, it never hurts. The only thing is, once you put those in, you got to make sure that they're monitored and they have to be maintained, because then it becomes a municipal responsibility to make sure that those are out there. But we have staff that does that anyway. Questions or comments? Any other? Member Spink?
One additional thing, I agree, of course, the language in the report is important, and being respectful of the concerns as well as presenting all of the data. There are some things that I also would say strongly object to. An always stop, Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 5, regulatory signs, I believe says must not be used for speed control, must not, it could affect the liability of the town if we were to implement something in contrary to that standard practice. That it can cause additional accidents, rear end and right angle collisions between vehicles. And so, it might, the councillors and council, I know things can get very heated, especially if there's public involvement. But that's one where I do think some strong language is kind of necessary. That's one thing I just wanted to state.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I actually send screen captures of that one. If anybody ever asks for a stop sign, I send the screen capture of the traffic manual to them just to let them know that that's not even something that I'm willing to forward to staff as a discussion, because it's not something that should be legally considered. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? All right, so I do have a resolution. Resolved that report DPW 2320 Roberts Road Citizen Petition dated July 24th, 2023 be received, and that council consider the conclusions and recommendations provided by staff therein. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have some correspondence from the Niagara Region. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive these items? There's Niagara Region Grimsby WTP or water treatment expansion, and Niagara Region individual environmental assessment. I need a mover and a seconder to receive. Councillor Howe, Councillor Kristanji. Any questions or comments on that correspondence? Seeing none, resolve that correspondence from Niagara Region be received. All in favor? It's carried. Under other business, we have a verbal update regarding parking restrictions on Governor's Road, Redwood Drive, McNabb Drive, and Nassau Drive. Mr. Warman, did you want to give a quick overview?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to give you an update. As you know, the Public Works Committee provided a resolution to council at the last meeting to implement parking restrictions on McNabb, Governors, and Redwood. The resolution followed the recommendation of staff to implement one-side parking restrictions on each of the streets, allowing essentially the other side of the road to be used for on-street parking. So staff's recommendation was intended to address the safety concerns that were raised about the vehicles parking on both sides of the road, which were, in our understanding, impeding the flow of traffic and pedestrian movements through the area. So at the last meeting, council provided a resolution back to the Public Works Committee to implement daytime, weekday restrictions on both sides of the road. Obviously, this is different from staff's recommendations and the Public Works Committee's recommendations or resolution. I'd say the staff is prepared to bring back a report and bylaw amendment to address council's direction. However, we did have some concerns with the direction being provided in that the changes are different than what we had communicated to the residents in the area. So as noted in the previous report, we did communicate the proposed one-size restrictions to the impacted residents in advance of making the changes, and essentially we're concerned that implementing the proposed daytime weekly restrictions without notifying the residents of our intent to do so may come as a surprise to the residents and may cause some further concerns. Also, just wanted to add that, that there were some comments made at the council meeting justifying the reasoning for the change in the council's direction being due to what the residents wanted. And I didn't have an opportunity, or staff didn't have an opportunity to speak at the council meeting. I just wanted to provide some clarification on the feedback, just to make sure that the committee and council are making an informed decision. So just to speak to that, so we did deliver notices of the proposed, again, one-side parking restrictions to the impacted residents. So we had 110 homes that were surveyed. We received feedback from 20 homes, or 18%. We had 5 respondents, or 4.5% of the home surveys, who specifically requested the daytime weekly parking restriction to be implemented rather than the one-side parking restriction. So I'd say, we don't think it's fair to say that because 82% people didn't respond, that means they were in favor of the parking restrictions that we were proposing. I would caution us to say that using that 4.5% or those 5 homes as a measuring stick for what the neighborhood wants. So that's where I'm proposing that before we make these changes, that we go back out with a notice to the residents informing of these changes, and we receive their feedback, just to ensure that they're not being surprised by, oh, we expected this is what the town communicated to us, and now we're getting this. So just with that in mind, I just wanted to communicate to the committee that this is going to take us some time to get those notices out to the residents again. So I'm not sure we can wrap this up in before the August meeting, but I'm certainly will action the team again with the heavy workload, but we'll try to get it done in a timely manner. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee. That's, just if there's any questions, I'm happy to speak to it.
Member Spink?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just for clarification, because it wasn't at the council meeting, is it still one side only, but now just daytime weekday instead of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, the way I read it, so the report be referred back to staff to amend the restrictions to Monday to Friday with the time of use. So I am taking that as it's both sides, daytime restrictions, Monday to Friday. Similar signs in the area are, I think it's 8 till 4 or 7:30 to 8:30, or sorry, 7:30 to 5:30 or 4:30, somewhere in that range. 7 to 4, okay. So that has how I'm taking the resolution, but I can certainly reach out to the councillor again just to clarify that.
I'm off for the summer, so if you need help delivering those, let me know. I absolutely respect the fact that we need to let people know that what's actually coming forward is different than what they've received notice of, so that we can get their feedback again. So I appreciate you doing that and staff doing that, and I think that's important because even though the 82% that didn't respond might not have carried either way, this change might be something they're interested in commenting on. So more discussion is always good, and being clear about things is always good. So, Councillor DeVoley.
Yes, through the chair to Mr. Morton. So just so that I am clear on this, we are contemplating parking on both sides except during the day, certain Monday to Friday, certain hours. So now I'm envisioning wintertime, and I'm envisioning snowplows going down those roads. So during the daytime, you have no problem getting the snowplow down the road because there won't be parking on either side, right? But you go snowplowing when you have to go snowplowing, which is not always between 8 and 4. So are we going to create problems for ourselves in the winter now? Because now we conceivably have parking on both sides in the winter during the evening and nighttime when our snowplows need to get down these roads again?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, those are one of the consideration that we, in why we brought the recommendation that we did forward was the daytime restrictions are limited to, obviously, that daytime period. After hours would be an issue, could be an issue. Saturday, Sundays could be an issue as well. So I understand that the hospital, like the concerns mainly came with respect, my understanding is hospital-related parking, right? People avoiding parking at the hospital, whether it's due to construction or wanting to not pay the fee or whatever it was, and are parking in that area. I understand the hospital still functions on the weekend, probably a lot less people coming in, but there still may be an opportunity for people to park on the weekend in that area. Again, I think I answered your question.
We're going to still have problems snow plowing in the evenings and on the weekends and at night.
Potentially.
I think an important part of this is that the original reasoning behind it was not, I don't think, because of the hospital, but for safety reasons. And the no parking, the irony of the proposal being brought forward by council is that the times where people are more likely to be on the street, like kids, which is evenings and weekends, we're allowing parking on both sides of the road, so I don't know that that necessarily solves any safety concerns that people have. It might solve the parking, the overflow from the hospital concern, but I don't think it makes the road safer in any way, because when kids are home at 5 o'clock at night and there's cars parked on the side of the road, or on the weekends and there are cars parked on the side of the road, those safety concerns are still there. But anyway, let's hear back from residents in that neighborhood who are the stakeholders and see if there are any concerns from them. So is there any other business pertaining to the committee? Seeing none, the next Public Works meeting is scheduled for August 28th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m.